The first day of free agency in the NBA was a pretty slow one considering how we're used to free agency starting off, but we did get signing of the major chip that everybody was kind of waiting on in Paul George. We're going to talk about the first day of free agency and more right after this.
Welcome to the number one place for your daily basketball news and analysis, NBA Central.
What's going on, basketball fans? Welcome to another episode of NBA Central, your number one spot for everything basketball related. I'm one of the hosts here, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at NBA Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today. So we had a pretty slow start to the first day of free agency. As a matter of fact, it was pretty quiet outside of a few signings, James Harden, things like that, for about the first couple of hours of free agency. And then things started trickling in, but finally, just about an hour ago, we got the major chip dropping of Paul George signs a 4-year, $212 million deal with the Philadelphia 76ers. A 76ers team that was pretty active on the first day of free agency, just kind of waiting for the chips to fall, things like that. They add Paul George, which was their major target in this draft, to really add that to Joel Embiid, trying to put a solid team together around Joel. Seems like the Philadelphia 76ers are a team that are really kind of terrified in a lot of ways of Joel Embiid asking for a trade. So in this, they re-signed Kelly Oubre Jr. to a 2-year, $16 million deal as well. They signed Paul George to that 4-year, $212 million deal. They also add Andre Drummond and Buddy Hield over the course of the first day of free agency. And I think this is a really nice start to free agency for the Philadelphia 76ers. They were a team that really needed to remake their roster. They had 4 players under contract coming into this free agency period, and they had the most cap space of any team in the NBA. And we all knew, right? We've known for now months that the Philadelphia 76ers did plan on pursuing Paul George in this deal. And so, in this offseason. So now they go out, they add him, and they have a nice now kind of platform, right? Let's see who else they can go out and get. They also drafted Adam Bona in the draft in this year, and this is another center who really can probably learn behind Andre Drummond here for a little while as well, and maybe be a solid backup center at some point if they can develop him in the ways that some people are hoping for. But I like what the Philadelphia 76ers have done so far in free agency. Again, they got a lot of things that they still need to work on as far as depth, things like that, but they've gone a big step in the right direction of kind of correcting the course correcting that path of the team. Now, the thing with Paul George is going to be, of course, with Paul George joining Joel Embiid, is that can't Joel Embiid be healthy in the playoffs like the Philadelphia 76ers are going to need him to? And if he's not fully healthy, how well have you crafted this team now around it to where they can still go further than what they did? The 76ers don't just have first-round aspirations. They have the goal of trying to actually compete for a title, and it's going to be difficult in the Eastern Conference. But listen, I like what they've done here. They had a nice start to free agency. I think if they can go out, find some solid role players to keep building this thing out, it can go really good for them as well. So that's really what you're looking at in free agency for the Philadelphia 76ers. Paul George, they get the prize of this offseason in Paul George. We got word that the Clippers, they even came out with a release to basically announce the fact that they knew Paul George wasn't going to come back. But outside of deals of that in the NBA, which that is the biggest one and the one that everybody was kind of waiting for, now the second day of free agency could in a lot of ways even be more active than the first day of free agency because of Paul George signing, and now all the other teams are not waiting on that. To kind of start free agency, we actually got something surprising happening, and Chris Paul was actually waived. And reportedly, the Chicago Bulls offered a deal around Zach LaVine for Chris Paul's contract, amongst other things, and the Warriors turned that down and instead decided to just waive Chris Paul outright, which is a crazy slap in not really a slap in the face, but it really does speak to where right now the trade value is for Zach LaVine, as the Bulls, as you can see, that's my team, continue to look for a place for Zach LaVine to go. Seems like that's going to be a difficult one. Also, seems like Klay Thompson and the Golden State Warriors are now set for a divorce, as most people had already expected at this point in time. It kind of is what it is when it comes down to that. We'll see where Klay Thompson ends up going. It was reported at points yesterday he will be talking with the Mavericks, the Clippers, amongst other teams as well. So we'll see where that goes. And as far as the Clippers that lost Paul George, they actually had a pretty interesting first day of free agency themselves. They signed Derrick Jones Jr. to a pretty nice contract on 3 years, $30 million. That's $10 million average annual salary. This is one of the largest deals that they've given out since they signed, as far as free agents deals, since they signed Kawhi Leonard. So that's a really good deal for them. Derrick Jones Jr., a big part of that Dallas Mavericks team and the run in the playoffs and what they were able to do there. But then they also made a kind of unexpected signing in bringing Kevin Porter Jr. back to the NBA. He signs with the Clippers. Keep in mind, Kevin Porter Jr., even in his last season, before he went through what he went through and off the court stuff, we're not going to talk about that here. This is still a player that averaged over 19 points per game. So now you've added a veteran in Derrick Jones Jr., and you've added Kevin Porter Jr. to your team. Not to say that either one of those guys are just an easy replacement for Paul George, but you can see what the Clippers are trying to do and how they're trying to replace that. Porter gets a fully guaranteed deal at the vet minimum. It's a 2-year deal, and this is basically a prove-it deal. Can you come back to the NBA and be effective? And I think I like what they did overall in that as well. And so it hasn't been some of the big moves, right? We outside of that, we got re-signings of like Kevin Love. He's going back to the Miami Heat. Luke Cornett's going back to the Boston Celtics. All solid deals. James Harden goes back to the Los Angeles Clippers as well on a 2-year, $70 million deal. Does James Harden go back to the Clippers on? And Max Christie as well. He signs with the Los Angeles Lakers on a 4-year, $32 million deal. He gets his money. Obi Toppin, 4 years, $60 million to stay with the Indiana Pacers as well. Alex Len re-signs with the Kings. But it hasn't been a lot of big moves yet, outside of the DeJounte Murray trade to the Pelicans, which we knew, before free agency opened. It was a pretty quiet day for the first day of free agency. A lot of re-signings that kind of made some sense. Some signings, some surprise returns like Kevin Porter Jr. Chris Paul does go to the San Antonio Spurs as well. Didn't want to miss that, so they get a point guard in Chris Paul to go and pair with Wemby, which I thought that they would have done in the draft, considering some of the young point guards that were in that draft. They could have kind of targeted. Caldwell Pope. I almost forgot KCP as well. He goes to the Orlando Magic on a 3-year, $66 million deal. And the Orlando Magic get a guy who, we know what he is as a role player, how he can step up as a two-way player as well. He can make some shots, adds to that kind of some of that offense that they are looking for. And the Orlando Magic, still a team that's looking for offense, right? They know that they've had the defense locked in. They're looking for some offense. They get it now with KCP, a two-way player, and they're still looking to add, right? Giannis Valanciunas is probably the most questionable deal for me so far on day one of free agency. When you look at him signing with the Washington Wizards, on a 3-year, $30 million deal. Now, I know that the Wizards are a team that are just looking for talent where they can find it. But ultimately, they just feel like, I don't know, that deal feels like it's just kicking the can down the road to me. I like what the Wizards did in the draft, don't get me wrong. They still got to kind of figure out that talent there. Najee Marshall as well, he signs a contract with the Dallas Mavericks as well on a 3-year, $27 million deal. You see the Dallas Mavericks are trying to replace what they lost in Derrick Jones Jr., trying to keep some depth on that team. Derrick Jones Jr. was such a big role player for them. And I want to put it in the context of a role player. That is what he is. But the variance that he brings there and the fact that he's, Derrick Jones Jr. is leaving now to go to a Clippers team that is going to try to go on a similar run to what the Dallas Mavericks did. They're hoping to really turn that thing around. And so that's what you're really looking at. We still got questions on Klay Thompson, of course, DeMar DeRozan being an unrestricted free agent. Do those chips now fall now that we know where Paul George is going as well? Those are kind of things to look at. But overall, day one in free agency was active enough, but started off extremely slow. Like we were live on the channel during the first basically 2.5 hours of free agency, and for the most part, nothing happened. Almost as soon as we logged off, that's when more things started happening. But it was still kind of all built around waiting, and you could understand that they were waiting to see where Paul George was going to go. And so now that Paul George has officially signed with the Philadelphia 76ers, it's going to be interesting and a thing to watch to see how other teams around the league are now start pulling the other big chips, right? Where else players start falling. So, it was enough. Teams did some things that made some sense. Not really a lot of questionable moves so far. I like the fact that the 76ers also brought Kelly Oubre back on top of, adding Eric Gordon, adding Andre Drummond, adding, of course, Paul George. So the 76ers so far, day one in free agency, have probably done the most to reshape their team. And they were the ones that needed to, right? We all knew that the Philadelphia 76ers, having 4 players under contract basically coming into this free agency period, they were going to have to be active. And so they went out, made the right moves, and now we can see. But let me know from you guys who, outside of the Paul George signing, of course, one free agency for you so far. How do you feel about day one? What are some of the best deals, most questionable deals that you've seen? Let me know all that down below. Make sure you guys are following the show at NBA Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, NBA Central Show at gmail.com. And then lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number one spot for everything basketball related, and I'll see you guys the next time I feel like making a video. I usually say probably tomorrow, but it's probably going to be today. Love you guys. Peace, y'all.
This has been a presentation of the Breaks Media.